Hello and welcome to Financial Technology Frontiers. We are at a wonderful conference of Blockchain Futurists today, and we are sitting among some of the world leaders in the area of digital assets, blockchains, tokenization, and the new world of finance. Yes, we are talking about crypto, we are talking about digital assets, and with me today is a luminary from ATB Financials. He is the VP for business and for digital assets at ATB Financials. With me today is Brian Ford, who is going to share us some wonderful aspects about how the digital assets, tokenization, and the new world economy is moving towards. Brian, welcome to Financial Technology
Pleasure.
Frontiers.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. It's kind of fun. How often do you get to, have a podcast outside on a cabana overlooking Lake Ontario in Toronto? It's a pleasure, and it's a great conference. So yeah, this is a futures conference. Everything around transformation of the financial industry, right? When you think about
Absolutely.
just whether it's Bitcoin or crypto or tokenization, Web3, now Web4, it's just the whole financial services industry is transforming. And it's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to be with you and just catching up. And just really quickly, yeah, I run transactional digital banking at ATB Financial, a number of lines of business. But one of those lines of business is what we call digital assets. And within digital assets, we'll talk further about it. There's a number of different areas that covers, and I manage that line of business for ATB Financial.
So, Brian, you have been head of digital assets in an economy like Canada, which has been very risk-averse economy
Yeah.
and which is slowly transitioning into this new world
Yes.
from the existing economy to that of the world of DeFi
Yeah.
into the world of digital assets. What kind of transition do you see, and especially after heading an organization in digital business like ATB?
It's a great question. It's interesting, right? So I always talk a little bit about traditional finance versus DeFi. So traditional finance, what a lot of people call it TradFi, right? And that convergence so I look at myself as a banker who was a traditional finance banker, as kind of sits in between the TradFi and DeFi world. We would have started ATB, we would have started supporting this industry a number of years ago. And we would have been one of the very few banks in the Canadian marketplace supporting the industry. And it's changed. If I think this conference is a great example of how corporate, how institutional it is, how all the banks in Canada are now looking and saying, well, how do we embrace DeFi technology? What you might want to call blockchain technology, what it would have been called, and now kind of what would be called distributed ledger technology, DLT, and how banks are all embracing it, right? So all the banks around the world are saying, well, how do we actually embrace DLT? How do we actually move what is a legacy, let's call it off-chain, to on-chain? And luckily, ATB is at the forefront of this. But what I love about what I see today is how the entire industry in Canada is starting to embrace this whole transition and convergence of TradFi and DeFi.
Interesting. And you have seen so much of interesting use cases of new age assets,
Yeah,
digital assets, cryptos, bitcoins on one side.
yeah,
You have stable coins on the other.
yeah,
The stable coins are taking off a big way.
yeah,
If you see $33 trillion worth of transactions
yeah.
have happened in 2025 alone. Where do you see this going now?
The first question I would say is when I was at this conference even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it was all around altcoins. It was all around like Bitcoin, altcoins. There was no stable coin. There was no tokenized deposit. There was no tokenization of capital markets, right? You fast forward 3 years later, it's all around stable coins, tokenization. And that's important because that's what's going to transform the industry, right? That's what's going to make payments faster, quicker, atomic, right? Real time. And ultimately those payments become more effective, cheaper for Canadians. It's like, it's just the right thing to do. But if I go back on stablecoin, I always think a really interesting stat is stablecoin volumes last year, volume of stablecoin transactions exceeded Visa and MasterCard combined. So stablecoins is here. It's real. So when you look at where it is today and that convergence, if you think of stablecoins is a payment tool, right? It's a digital asset that's backed by a dollar, right? So it has a reserve on the back end, which could be the US dollar, could be the Canadian dollar. So one-to-one backing. So the purpose of a stablecoin is a payment tool. So if you actually think about, so Bitcoin's an asset class. But if you think about Bitcoin, you wouldn't want to make a payment with Bitcoin. So I always tell the story that I went into a coffee shop in Vancouver, a great coffee shop called Revolver. It's amazing coffee, and they accept Bitcoin for payment. The problem is if I pay with my Bitcoin, that price of coffee, it's going to fluctuate. They could be getting more, or they could be getting less, right? Depending upon the price of Bitcoin. So it's not a good payment tool. Whereas if I went in and paid with a stable coin, right, it's back one-to-one to a reserve currency. So it makes sense for payments. And the real use case of stable coins is international remittance. Because again, it's a faster way to send. It's atomic. It's real-time settlement, and it avoids currency fluctuations. There's some real value to moving money internationally using stablecoins over what you have today is very legacy, expensive, slow banking payment system, right? So the future with stablecoin, it's here now. It exists today. And the reason why you see banks, global banks, Visa, MasterCard, Swift, everyone is investing in stablecoin. Now, I will follow with one distinction, and that is tokenized deposits. There's a difference between the two. Tokenized deposit is just a digital version of your bank. A stable coin is a digital dollar. So that's the difference. So if you think about a cash dollar, if I pulled out a dollar, well, we don't have dollar bills anymore, but I pulled out a dollar bill, that's a legacy dollar, right? Stable coin is just a digital dollar. So it's
Absolutely.
really important for Canada for us to have stable coins. Because if you don't have Canadian backed stable coins, you don't have a digital Canadian dollar. And all countries want to have its sovereignty, right? Digital sovereignty. So really important. Whereas a tokenized deposit, that would be like ATB offering, we don't do today, but offering our clients a version of their bank account digitally. And that's a tokenized deposit. And we're seeing the emergence and the acceptance of tokenized deposits. So all banks globally are investing in how do we actually build out tokenized deposits to move money between ourselves and our clients, but then to move money between banks. And yes, it's all emerging, it's all new, and not all of it's here today. But when you sit at a conference like this, it's all starting to happen.
Absolutely. And Canada is already taking a lot of steps towards Canadian stable coins any which ways.
Yes,
So there has been a lot of
there's a
initiatives
lot.
as such. And I'm sure that banks like ATB will also be part of some of those
They
initiatives
are.
as well.
So the regulators, so obviously regulators pass the Stablecoin Act, provide regulations about stablecoins, so making sure that banks have a one-to-one reserve, right? So holding it in a cash reserve, which is important for stability of the stablecoin. I would say it's one step further now. The regulators are looking to say, well, how do we manage tokenization? Because there's all these other use cases. So they use the term tokenization of RWAs or real world assets. So there's tons of tokenization use cases out there. It could be tokenization of public stock. It could be tokenization of private equity. Obviously, tokenization of deposits. You get tokenization of real estate. So we could take the TD Tower downtown, right? We could tokenize that, put it on blockchain, and you could and people around the world buy a piece of TD Tower. Doesn't exist today, but those are the type of use cases. So the regulators, they're looking seriously. What is tokenization? How do we regulate tokenization so Canadians can have the opportunity to participate?
Superb. And from a bank's perspective, which are some of those interesting tokenization samples you feel can be the low-lying fruits for the banks according to you?
Tokenization deposits that I talked about. That's just a natural one. And you know what? I will guarantee you within 12, 18 months, all banks will have tokenization of deposits. But I would say that for me, some of the real use cases is in our capital markets business. Tokenization of bonds, tokenization of repos. Those are real natural. And in Canada today, there's pilots and there's POCs around both of those. So if you actually think of capital markets today, Capital markets is a T plus two, T plus three. Uh, like money movement doesn't move that quickly. And the thing with tokenization is it's atomic. It's real time money movement. So when you think about programmable and atomic, and I'll use the final term smart contract, it all merges together. So I always use, I don't know, maybe the example would be shipping something. So think trade finance, right? Something's on a ship. And the moment that you send that information over the blockchain, so you have a smart contract to say, hey, you received that shipment on the boat. So there's your smart contract. It's programmable to say, well, once I know it's on the boat, I'm going to make payment. Now I can make payment using stablecoin, atomic in real time. All that occurs on the blockchain. And that's where the future will lie in in money movement and financial services. And trade is such a great example of it. And so is capital markets.
Super. If you go to international conferences like Cybos,
Yeah.
you can see the future of stablecoins, the future of trade finance
Yeah.
in this world of stablecoins.
And it's all true. And trade is such a legacy traditional finance business. And you see that convergence of that trade and that TradFi world and the DeFi world. And it's just fascinating. And it's moving so fast. And again, look at a conference like this. It's institutional, it's corporate. That's because these two industries converge.
Especially remittances, global payments. These are some of the places which are actually being revolutionized by stablecoins in a big way. And I think it is really amazing to see the way they have fast-tracked the pace of the transactions today, especially in trade finance or especially in global remittances. And there are a lot of case studies, even Bank of Canada and along with other central banks have been doing some very interesting cases together. Now, when you come as a regulator's perspective, every bank ultimately is a heavily regulated body.
Yes.
And from a bank's perspective, to adopt anything interesting, especially in the area of stable coins or digital assets, what kind of conducive environment of regulations would you, as a banker, desire to have it?
Yeah, so I think two things there. So when the banks want clear rules, right? So what we can do and what we can't do. And I would say today in Canada, a lot of the rules are there for custodians, right? Who hold the digital assets, exchanges who trade the digital assets. The rules are not always clear for the banks. But you know what's fascinating about this conference? There's regulators everywhere. They're all here. They're all listening. They're learning. They're helping creating the regulatory environment which protects change. Right? It's all about that. That's the most important thing. So the regulatory environment is changing dramatically. Right? And you have the Genius Security Act in the U.S. That has really sped up regulations around the world. You saw the US and UK announce joint regulations last week that developed joint regulations around tokenization. So that will help influence what Canadian does. But the one thing that I always say to the regulators is have the banks at the table and have us together. And that's what they do. I was with CSA a couple of weeks ago. They did a round table with about 50 of us around how do we tokenize? How do we start the process of building tokenization regulations? So, you're sitting there with CSA together with all the banks, respective lawyers and consultants in this field to make sure that we come up with regulations that are protect consumers, but provide clear guidance to financial institutions.
Interesting. And as an industry practitioner, what do you see are some of those bottlenecks that are actually, narrowing down the pace of growth? Where do you see there can be some acceleration possible?
Yeah, like I think it's moved really fast. And I think banking doesn't always move that fast. But when I look at stablecoins, I mean, a year ago, we would be sitting here. There wasn't even stablecoin legislation, I don't think there was any. And now we have legislation. Now we know they've committed to tokenization legislation by the new year. We'll have that a year from now when we're sitting at this particular conference. So I actually think the regulations are moving quite quickly, but I think there's a role that industry plays in helping the regulator. There's a role that academic plays in helping the regulators. All of that needs to come together. can't be done by the regulators on their own. And then from the bank standpoint is you'll see initiatives. And I will, good on TD Bank and Stablecorp. We saw a recent announcement of them around QCAD, their stablecoin. I think that's a great initiative, right? I love the fact this is the big five. I'm all around access to banking. It's really important. And obviously, I'm a big fan of digital assets. I'm a big fan of all of this. And I want to see it embraced by all the big five banks. And I think a year from now, we're going to see full embrace.
Interesting. That is a very good landscape that we are looking at from a year from now. And when you look at some of those emerging technologies that are making, their inroads into the financial services ecosystem, especially from the digital assets, tokenization,
Yeah.
kind of, or blockchain perspective. I remember 7 years back when I went to Cybos in the UK, it was blockchain was probably a technology, a solution which was trying to find out a problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And today, at least, we are seeing such very
Yeah.
interesting perspectives about how blockchain is being
Yeah.
used. So, what are those emerging technologies
Yeah.
that are coming in where you see adoption very quickly? And what are those winners which helps those technologies to be adopted
Yeah.
faster?
I think I think often the question asked is what's the friction you're trying to solve, right? So for me, I still contend stablecoin global money movement. It is just transformative, right? It's going to transform money movement. And if you think about it, today, if I move money around the world, I move money in, say, a country where currencies are volatile. So I might send a dollar Canadian, but it's a volatile currency, and that may not be a dollar when it gets to that country. The beauty of a stablecoin money movement is it's pegged, maybe to the Canadian dollar, maybe the US dollar, maybe the euro, but it's pegged, which means that dollar stays as a dollar, and that individual in that country can choose to take that dollar when they need it, and they don't have their currency fluctuation. That's the one that excites me the most, because that actually creates financial well-being for everyone around the world, right? So that's the type of technology. The other one that excites me is just when I look at Swift and that initiative with Swift, 24 banks around the world using tokenized deposit to basically settle. That's
Amazing.
fascinating. It's amazing. So, I guarantee you, it's 24 today. Be interested to see how maybe it's going to be 2,400 a year from now. And now you're talking about immediate blockchain money movement or distribution ledger technology, DLT, atomic instantaneous money movement and settlement between banks. I actually think those are game changers. They move the needle.
Super. Especially when tokenization comes with such a strong adoption in different economies.
Yes.
Okay. I see a lot of possibilities for even credit rating of customers who are trying to do international businesses
Yes.
taking place with this kind of tokenized deposits.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes so go back to international trade and obviously trade finance is one of the businesses I manage at the bank, right? This makes international trade easier. International trade today, it's hard. It has friction. It has high costs. It has risk, right? All that exists in international trade. And we both work in Asia, right? We know, right, how complex international trade is. I think everything that we're talking about helps international trade become much more efficient, safer, it reduces risk, and it speeds up the whole process, right? So I think international trade is just it will have such an impact upon the trade financial flows with stablecoin with tokenization.
And do you see a great impact of the geopolitical situations on stable coins across the world?
I think what I would say on stablecoins is every country wants to protect their digital currency. So this is the example I use today. About 48% of cash, the legacy dollar is US dollars. And that's fine. US dollar is the reserve currency around the world. 99% of stablecoin, digital dollar is USD. So you need your own sovereign cash. Canadian sovereign cash, Euro, Japanese yen, Korean won. Everyone needs to offer a stable coin in their own currency because the only way to protect the digital dollar. So that's why stablecoin, you will see multiple stablecoins offered by around the world countries. You have to. It's a digital dollar, and if you don't, so I always equate it to this. If I walked into a branch today and said I want to get a Canadian dollar and all they offered me was a US dollar, that would not be acceptable. So we need to have a Canadian stable coin, Canadian sovereignty.
100%. And I am absolutely of that opinion as well. You need to have your own sovereignty by the way of stable. If you see 5 years from now, if you sit in the same, setting as that of Lake Ontario with Toronto City behind us, what would you be imagining the future 5 years from now when it comes to the world of tokenization, digital assets, and the money of the future?
We're not going to be here asking about crypto or Bitcoin or stablecoin or tokenized deposits. It's going to be embedded. It's going to be part of our DNA. We're going to move money around the world. And you know what? That rail probably is, it's going to be a DeFi blockchain rail. It's going to be atomic. It's going to be way cheaper than it is today. We're not going to be talking about, well, is that a stable coin? Is that a altcoin? Is that a Bitcoin? Is that a tokenized deposit? It would just be, I just moved money from here to there, and it was frictionless, and it was inexpensive, and it was real time, which is
Super. Everything embedded into the system,
embed.
and
Yes.
the undercurrent is not seen on the top of the ocean.
Yeah.
Super. That
Thank
was a
you.
great way to close it. Thank you very much,
Appreciate
Brian,
it.
for
Thank
a
you so
wonderful
much. Thank
conversation.
you.